Welcome to Learning Excel. My name is Raphael. In this video now, we're going to be talking about what a pivot table is. So a pivot table is a very powerful tool to have in your arsenal. With the pivot tables, you can quickly group and summarize large amounts of data in a concise manner for analysis. This is the critical thing about the advantage of a pivot table, that it takes all the relevant data here and you can summarize it very quickly. So we're going to see that in this demonstration. Now, creating a pivotal view is easy, believe it or not, and it's easy as just dragging a few fields, as we will see. Its ability, or pivot table ability, to sort, count, and summarize large amounts of data into meaningful reports, giving the user the ability to make sound and comparative decisions. So once you have this raw data here, as you can see, and you convert it to a pivot table, it's going to allow you and upper management to make very important decisions based on summary of data rather than looking at this. So here, if I were to ask you what is the total for Alice mutton product for a various customer in Q1 in the year 2016, then you're going to have to do a tremendous amount of navigation through filtering the process, finding the specific customer, finding the specific quarter and the year and so on, and trying to get that data. Whereas if you use a pivot table, it can be done very, very quickly, as I'll demonstrate in a second. A couple of things to note is that when you actually create a pivot table, you have two options. One is, if you will, Excel provides you with a recommended pivot table, as we will see, if you want to select that, or you can create your own pivot table from scratch, which we'll show you also. The other thing is, that's very important, at least a couple of things that come to mind, that when you're creating a pivot table, you must have column headers. This is very important, as the pivot table relies on these column headers. And then you can have no gap within the data. So for example, if I click here and right click and insert a row here, this would only create a pivot table for this particular range, and it would omit the other one. So that's very important, that all your data that you're trying to create a pivot table does not have any spaces or spaces and rows. And then what I'll show you is, I'll show you how you can use the slicer, which we've used before, to even filter the data for products and customer as an example. So let's look at this. So here, as you can see, we have raw data. We've got a product, we've got a customers, Q1, 2, 3, 4, and then the year from 2016 right up to 17 and 18. And as you can see, we've got a lengthy amount of data, although in the real world, this is hardly anything. But the whole point is, let's create a pivot table and we can make sound decisions. So in this example, I'm going to start with giving a recommendation pivot, see how Excel handles it and what it looks like, and then we'll create one from scratch. So in order to create a pivot table, you can select anywhere in the range. Don't click outside, click anywhere in the range. Once you do that, go to the Insert tab, left click, and here, as you can see, you have two basic options: the recommended pivot tables and then the pivot table you create from scratch. So let's look at both and see what we're talking about. So I'm going to click on recommended first and just left click it. And as you can see, this window will pop up and it asks you, and it gives you the recommendation for pivot tables. As you can see, let me just expand this a little. As you can see now, it's giving you these various options as I click on it. So it's giving you summary data. So look at the first one that is highlighted. It's giving you sum of Q4 by product. So here's all the products, and here are the sum of the Q4. In this particular case, it's giving you very similar data. It's giving you sum of Q2, sum of 3, sum of 4 of all the products, and so on. So this is the power, as you can see, even with recommended pivot tables, to give you it. And you can decide which ones you want. So here, if you click on here, it's sum of quarter by the year. So here you've got the 3 years, 16, 17, 18, and it's giving you aggregate sum information for Q3, and we can expand that. So if you don't like that, we can look at this. And as you can gather, it's giving you summary data plus grand totals of Q4, 1, and so on by the year. And again, this is something you can select. So if we go, okay, we're comfortable with this one, then go okay. And obviously it'll give you it in another worksheet. And this is the quick data. And as you can see, it created the summary data for the years 16, 17, 18 of each quarter that we're talking about. In this case, we didn't select 4, but you can do it. So this is how you can create a pivot table using the recommended option. And of course, here is what's called a pivot table fields. So I'm going to actually delete this because I'm going to create one from scratch so we can do that. So I'm going to go delete and OK. And remember, we're going to get a warning here. So here, as you can see now, we're going to start again. So remember, go anywhere. It doesn't really matter where. Go anywhere. Go insert. And this time now, we're going to say create a pivot table. And as you can see, it says easily arrange and summarize complex data in a pivot table. So if I just click this window will pop up. Now, the first window, that create pivot table, has some defaults, which we're going to accept. So the first thing, as you can see, the other thing I notice is that, as you can see, the entire data has been selected when we went to create pivot table. And this is the reason I was saying that you cannot have an empty space between each data, as this will only gather the range until that break. So make sure you don't have any spaces. So getting back to this, so choose the data that you want to analyze. In our case, it automatically selects the entire range, which is this, the pivot table. And that's fine. Then the other option is, where do you want the pivot table to report to be placed? You can do it in a new worksheet or the existing worksheet. Now, I've got this data right here, so if I do it here, it may overlap here. I could certainly do that, or I can put new. For our purposes, we'll just go in new, and just like before, it'll create a sheet. So I'm just going to go OK. As soon as I do that, you can see now on the left-hand side, it's got where you can build the report, and on the right side, it's got the pivot table fields. Now, one thing to note, as I mentioned, the importance of having all the fields or having column headers is because that's what it's based on. As you can see, this particular report, we can select the specific fields that we want to summarize our data on. Now, the other thing is, you can see the drag the fields between these below area, and I'll demonstrate that here. You have 4 options. You've got the filter, which we'll see in a second. You've got columns, rows, and values. Obviously, you would probably understand what rows are and what columns are, but in this particular case, you can see there's some value here. So generally speaking, virtually 99.9% of the time, when you're talking about values here, we're talking about numbers. So what are the numbers that you want to add or summarize? Place them in here in terms of fields. So let's look at that. So let's just go baby steps and see what happens when we select one of the fields. So I'm going to start with the product. As soon as I select this, you can see on the left-hand side, all the products have been given a distinct value. So rather than going over here, as you can see, we've got, this is one product, this is another product, this is another product, and so on. So what the pivot table did is just quickly give distinct values for the products. And as you can see, there it is. Now, the other thing is, if I wanted to remove this, I could just uncheck it, check it, or I could just remove it by unchecking it also. Now, here, let's just check this, and here is a list. Now, notice here it's being presented in the rows. If I click on customer, it'll go by default into the rows also. So now you can see it's expanded with an outliner. So not only is it giving you the product name here, but it's also giving you a subcategory of all the, what was it? That was the actually product, and that's now the customers within that particular product. So as you can see, this is a great benefit, and it's easily summarizing it. Now, what if I add a year to it? It's going to give me the sum of the year and so on. So as you can see, this is easy, but this isn't the questions that we want to ask. We want to ask basically questions like, what are the products used by each customer in a certain quarter or a certain year? So let's click on this. And this isn't giving us much information. Let's look at the product table. And first thing we want to do actually is look at the numbers here, the values. We want certainly a value here. So let's look at the question quarter 1. If I click on that, you'll notice it's being added here. Here, as you can see now, we've got all the we've got all the products grouped, as you can see right here, all the product groups and their summary of sales for Q1. So Alice Mutton product sold this much, and you can format it later if you wish. And of course, you've got the grand total here. So that is for the sum of Q1. What about if I wanted to know the sum of not only Q1 but Q2? Simple. Just click on this and it will add it. Now, you can certainly add it by clicking it, or you can left click and drag it. And notice also it's giving now the sum total of Q1 and Q2 for each product. You'll notice here that I've got sum 2 after sum 1. And if I wanted to change that order, you can just go up here if you want, and suddenly this is changed. But obviously you want it in order. Left click, take away, and that's it. So if you want to remove a certain thing, left click, remove. So now go back to Q1. So as you can see, this is a very powerful tool to have in creating aggregate data for very important things. Now, what about the customer? So let's say we want to look at customer 2 quarters, Q1, Q2. And we want to look at the products also. If I click on the product, you'll notice that, as I mentioned, it's highlighted here. What about the year? If I click on the year, it'll give me more detailed information of aggregates here. The other thing now is this is entering the values here in a row. What if I wanted to find out some across horizontally meaning columns? So let's look at some of the products or things we can do with that. So I'll uncheck everything here. Great. So let's look at the customer. So here are all the customers. And we can ask what product they bought. We can say this. And that's fine.